Hello, everyone, and welcome to Compassionate Conversations. I'm Tanys with My Place Home Care, and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host, Heidi Gagne.
Thank you. Hello.
And we have an awesome guest today, Eric Heiden. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you do and what you've been doing? Because it's lots of exciting new stuff.
Yeah. So I'm a kinesiologist and I'm a clinician and I'm the co-owner of NeuroGym Rehabilitation. And NeuroGym is an Ottawa-based clinic. We primarily do physiotherapy, but we also offer a range of allied health services, including kinesiology, massage therapy, social work, and coming soon speech pathology services out of our clinic. But primarily we've been a physical rehabilitation and, as I said, mainly physiotherapy clinic. Our specialty is working with injuries and illnesses of the nervous system. So we see a range of clients from people recovering from nervous system type injuries. So these would include spinal cord injuries, different forms of brain injury, also stroke, and things like peripheral nerve injuries. And then we also see clients dealing with chronic or progressive conditions related to the nervous system. So this would include multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and forms of neuropathy. So we work with clients both coming back from, let's say, a one-time event or dealing with a progressive condition. But our approach kind of covers all of those areas. And we work, as I say, with primarily people with nervous system type injuries, but not exclusively. So our approach also works well with complex orthopedic injuries. So people recovering from things like hip replacements that don't go well tend to do well with our approach. We're essentially a clinic where we focus on learning and improving motor function. And so, we started this working with nervous system injuries, but there's applications for all kinds of injuries. So we do work with clients with complex back pain and with all sorts of injuries.
Oh, wow.
And what area of town are you in, Eric?
So we're in the West End. We're on Morrison Drive. We're about 2 doors down from Lee Valley Tools, which is usually a good reference point for people in the Ottawa area. Almost everybody knows where that is. But it's near the
IKEA and Lee Valley Tools. Everybody knows where those are.
We're about two buildings over from Lee Valley.
Okay.
And our clinic's on the first floor of our building, and it's kind of, we chose it in part because it's very accessible. We have kind of a nice, bright, open space, and it's, very easy for our clients to get to.
Excellent. Accessibility is very important, especially with the clients that you probably have.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this month is Brain Injury Awareness. So, okay, I want to ask, it's going to be a very basic question, but what is a brain injury, both minor and a major injury? What can they be?
Sure. Yeah, brain injuries can take lots of forms, but essentially it's some kind of damage to the organ, that sits inside our skull. And there are lots of ways, unfortunately, that we can damage that. One is through an external force, so a blow. And
sorry, you cut out there.
Yeah.
So we heard external force.
Yeah, I can start that over. Okay. Yeah. So a brain injury can come from all kinds of different sources, whether it's from an external blow to the head, so something that kind of hits the head and jars the brain around inside the skull and kind of physically damages it. Brain injuries can also come from swelling that occurs around the brain. So sometimes a stroke is considered a brain injury, where you may have either bleeding in the brain or lack of blood flow to the brain. All of those things can damage this kind of complex and vulnerable organ that we've got inside our skulls. Whether it's from an internal or an external cause, anything that sort of damages these neurons inside of our brain is a form of brain injury.
Okay, so like
and then
concussion.
They can be very severe.
You're right.
Yeah, a concussion is considered a mild brain injury. So they can be sort of graded according to severity, and it's really based on how many of these, brain cells are damaged, or
Okay.
how widely the damage is spread across the brain. So a concussion type injury where the head is sort of hit from an external force and the brain, bounces around, there might be damage to multiple areas of the brain. So it's this sort of organ suspended in fluid inside the skull, and it can kind of bounce back and forth. And so damage can be focused. It can be just on a single portion of the brain, or it can be diffuse and sort of spread throughout the brain.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a lot to it. I guess goes into the idea of brain injury, and then it can take the physical effects can take a lot of different forms as well.
Right.
So depending on the severity of the damage, the location of the damage, the physical effects that the client would have can be really, really diverse. It can be very focused, again, where in a stroke that affects a very specific portion of the brain, maybe you've got speech loss and then nothing else, physical effects. Whereas in a diffuse injury, let's say where the brain sort of bounces around inside the skull and multiple areas are damaged, you can have a whole range of physical or cognitive or other types of effects. So everything that the brain does is potentially affected by a brain injury.
Wow.
Which is almost everything, right? So
yeah,
it can be quite catastrophic, really. So,
so really, is a minor brain injury still minor, or like it just seems like it would just be a lot?
It depends where it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And any injury to the brain, I mean, we can say minor, but any injury to such an important organ, can have a major disruption of somebody's life as well. And yeah, sometimes it seems maybe a little bit unfair to call something a mild injury when the effect that it has on the person's life can be very, very severe. So like a concussion, which is called a mild traumatic brain injury, can have huge life-changing effects on someone if it's like light sensitivity, chronic headaches. Like that's a major disruption of that person's daily life, even though it's called a minor injury. I guess it just underscores how important this organ is to our function. But really the mild or minor is just degrees of damage to the organ, but not so much in terms of how it may affect a person's daily function. I think that's maybe a separate classification, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because even even terrible headaches, even regular headaches. I mean, that might just seem, okay, I have a headache every now and then, but to have one every single day or all day long, it's hard to live your life normally. You can't.
Yeah, definitely.
So I that's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
So how does neuroplasticity figure into that? Because we can make new neural pathways, right? So.
Right. Yeah. Neuroplasticity is a very interesting and exciting concept and term, and it's could be its own discussion, and probably is its own discussion in all kinds of podcast sources and even books. And so, just kind of briefly, it's the concept that these connections in our brain, so all of these cells in the brain, the neurons, the things that can be damaged in a brain injury, the way that they connect with one another and signal to one another and sort of speak to one another, and the patterns of those connections are the things that we have learned to do. So as we learn to do something new, whether it's a physical skill, whether it's a cognitive skill, whether it's a coordination pattern, all of those are represented as connections between neurons in our brain. And so a brain injury damages or disrupts those connected networks, and we kind of lose skills, or skills that we've learned are disrupted. And it was thought for a long time that those structures in the brain and some of those connections were sort of fixed, static, and sort of predetermined, that the brain was hardwired, to use kind of an older term, and that if you broke those connections and you disrupted them, there was no coming back from that because the brain was sort of static and fixed and it developed the way it developed. So neuroplasticity is a newer concept in sort of understanding neuroscience and brain function. I say new, but it's like 30 or 40 years old now. But we're still kind of coming to grips with the implication. And what it is that these connections in the brain are plastic in that they're changeable. And so we're able to learn and make new connections throughout our lifetime, and that the brain that thought was a static, or that was thought to be a static structure, is really not, that it's a very changeable structure. And the nature and the amount of change can be really significant, that we can, with practice, sort of rewire the brain and really significantly change these networks and these connections. And it's exciting because the implication of that is that after an injury, there's significant relearning that someone can do.
Right.
And so after a stroke, or after a major brain injury, or even a minor brain injury, with practice, with using the brain, we're actually able to form new connections, learn new ways of doing something that maybe was lost to an injury. And that reorganization can be quite significant. So the degree of change that we can make, I don't think we yet understand, kind of, but we're starting to, 30 years on, understand a little bit the rules for, how much practice at what intensity, produces these types of changes, and understanding a little bit about how significant those can be, and what kinds of things we can expect from the injured brain. So it's kind of a powerful concept, I think, in rehabilitation, and gives a lot of hope to recovering from injury. This idea that, we can make changes to the structure of the brain, and learn new skills, and learn to do things we may have lost, learn to do again, or more correctly, I guess, learn new ways to do things that we haven't been able to do.
Oh. It's very intense conversation. It's very intense topic, like you don't think about exactly what your brain does until you cannot do it.
But a great, really accessible book, a kind of popularly written book by Dr. Norman Doidge, who's a Canadian psychiatrist from the GTA. He wrote a book a number of years ago called The Brain That Changes Itself. And it's a great kind of introduction to plasticity, and talking about, and it's kind of done from the perspective of people's stories. So he kind of goes through cases of a number of people who, had different types of brain injuries or conditions affecting the nervous system, and then how they were able to change their function and their everyday things that they did, and then getting into the background science of how neuroplasticity underlies some of those changes. He also did a PBS or TV series about that I remember watching back in the early 2000s. That's really good as well. But yeah, really great book. I think there's a follow-up to it as well. But these are nice kind of, and it's written not for, an academic, but it's written for anybody to kind of pick up.
Oh, that's important.
Definitely.
That's important for sure. So, I mean, we're advancing in the knowledge of our brain and how our brains work, and how we can relearn things. What kind of technological advances have there been in the last little while that kind of helps us to relearn things? Like, I mean, I was looking on your website, and you guys have a slew of equipment and various things. And one thing I was looking at was called the Pons. So it's it gently stimulates the surface of the tongue. So I'm curious, like, how does something like that help in rehabilitation?
Right. Yeah. So the Pons isn't a device that we've made ourselves at NeuroGym. We're like in a partner clinic to Pons, which is, I think it's an American-owned company right now. But it's part of a class of, I guess, newer technologies which I guess broadly are called like neuromodulating technologies. So
Okay.
the idea that the brain is plastic, that it can change. There are a couple of things that we're starting to learn about what's necessary to create that change. And one of them is definitely practice. So we know that trying to do different things, effort, sort of attempting, if it's movement, attempting to move and lots of repetition of those movements, those are the things that create new connections between neurons. They're the things that reshape the network of connections. So all of those things are driven by effort, they're driven by practice and driven by repetition. So that's sort of one of the key ingredients that we definitely are aware of. And a lot of what we do at NeuroGym is kind of focused on creating the right conditions for people to practice the things that they're not able to do. So we're kind of creating environments where somebody who can't stand up under their own power can do that skill, because that's one of the key difficulties practically is, so you know the brain is plastic, it can change with enough practice, but if somebody's not able to do something, how do you get them to practice it, you know, in a way that's going to change it? So that's a lot of what we've worked at solving, is that practical challenge of how do you get someone into a situation where they can, if they can't walk, get to the point of taking a step, and then do that often enough that they get better at it. And then on top of that, so I mean, as if that wasn't significant enough of a challenge, figure out how do you put someone in a situation where they can make a reasonable attempt at doing something they're not able to do is a bit of a challenge. But on top of that is this new class of technologies called neuromodulating technologies. And the PONS is one of them, and there are a number of others. But the idea is there are certain things we can do to prepare the brain or make the brain more amenable to doing plastic change while engaged in these kinds of processes. So it's a way to kind of boost the brain's plastic ability. You still need that effort and that practice, but there's a number of technologies that are coming onto the scene more recently that are designed to sort of boost that process along. And so the PONS is one of them. And the idea behind it is this stimulation in the tongue, the sensory sort of nerve in the tongue leads to a nucleus in the brain. It's pretty close. So there's a sort of quick connection to the brain stem. And the idea behind the technology is that it stimulates a little bit the brainstem, that gets relayed up to the cortex, and it kind of makes the brain a little bit more excited, lowers some of the thresholds for some of the cells to fire. And if you're wearing the device, getting that brain or getting that stimulation that's relayed to the brain, and then you start to do your physical movement and practice, you can get a little bit of an edge on that plastic change. So you still need to be moving. You can't kind of just have the stimulation and then sit down and sort of wait for change to happen, but it kind of adds on top of that practice. But the PONS is one example. Another example is transcranial magnetic stimulation. And this is usually, it's done under the supervision of a physician, but it's targeted electromagnetic stimulation kind of through the skull directly onto the brain surface. And the magnetic field creates kind of an electric current that changes the threshold for the cells to fire. So you can actually prime areas of the brain to be more ready to be active. And again, it's this one of these additive technologies where if you prep the brain, get it more ready to respond, then when you're doing your physical training, you get a little bit of a heightened response to that. There are also some medications that have been designed to do the same thing. So there's a few classes of drugs that people can take, and their targeted effect is to sort of prime the brain and nervous system to respond to this type of exercise and physical activity that is going to create plastic changes in the brain. So it's definitely an area where there's a lot of excitement, but it's a relatively new area. And so a lot of these technologies, I think, are still in their early stages in terms of figuring out, so how much, is needed, what frequency is it needed, but all of them are designed to layer on top of that core element, which is you have to be able to move and you have to be able to put effort into kind of learning the skill. And without that, the technologies themselves don't do anything, but they're designed to layer on top of it.
So they kind of give the person a little bit of a kickstart, where they can actually feel like they've accomplished something. Because I would imagine a lot of the rehabilitation is, not in their physical brain, but in their mind of like, can I really do this? And depending on how the injury occurred, if it was something in an accident or something, doing something might scare them more and hinder them. Because I noticed as well that you offer, you have a social worker, so you offer connections to counseling and psychotherapy, which I thought, I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant, because not only do you have a physical block, but you could have that internal mental block, and to have somebody that says, no, this is more than just you not being able to do this. This is, you're stopping yourself as well. To have that service provided, I think that's fantastic, because I'm very pro mental health and counseling and everything like that. And there's so many different reasons why you would need it. But I feel I've never had a horrible injury or anything like that that I need to be rehabilitated from. But I know that I've had to do physical therapy for a lower back injury. And let me tell you, I don't always do the exercises that they tell me to do, and so it's just like having that little edge that helps you see the results must be fantastic. It must be so helpful as physical therapists as well, to encourage them to continue doing these things, because everybody wants something easy, right? We don't want to work hard for anything.
And unfortunately it seems like these plastic changes only come through effort and through work. But if you can find ways to make that smoother, kind of help it along, and certainly like having social work and counseling is a new area for us, but I think it is a fantastic fit, because we certainly find that we're, as you've said as well, assigning people homework, but it can be challenging to do that, and sometimes we're trained as therapists to sort of figure out, so what's our best intensity, but what we maybe aren't trained as well in is, how does that, what we're asking the client to do, fit within all of the other challenges that they've got going on in their life right now? And while we have some appreciation of that, we're not really trained, I don't think, to help them manage it. And I think that's where having the social worker skills really, really shines for that. So clients certainly can feel overwhelmed by, I have to do this, I have to do that, I've got to figure this out. And on top of that, I've got home exercises to do. How do I manage all of this? And that may come on top of, an injury that has changed somebody's life in a huge way, or a diagnosis with a progressive condition that carries all kinds of anxiety-inducing visions of the future. So mental health is, I think, a great addition to that, and we really look forward to kind of continuing working with our social worker here at the clinic too. But it's been a great addition so far.
Yeah, great addition. And probably one I might not see in other rehabilitation centers and stuff. So I think that's really great. It sets you guys apart for sure, in my opinion.
I hope so. It's almost we were looking around kind of for similar models, when we're considering adding the service, and where I did see it was in almost like high performance sport areas, where they would have physical training and then a sports psychologist to sort of help athletes, push to their maximum.
That's
and
true.
Whether they are professional athletes or, aging amateur athletes who just want to kind of do their best. That was sort of the model that we saw, is, where you're coaching someone toward performance. And that's certainly a way we can look at it. I think it doesn't have to be, something it's because you're you're low, you know, that you need this service. It's more like this person can help coach you to achieving something. So it's we can look at it as a similar model where you're trying to, you know, move towards your goals, move forward, and this person's here to sort of help you along.
And it doesn't hurt to have more people in your village, right? Like,
That's
more
Absolutely.
people to encourage you and everything. Because I know, like, if I'm struggling with something on my own, the minute I talk to my girlfriends, it's like, no, you got this. And I'm like, I do have this. You're right. And then, you know, and whether it's a physical rehabilitation, it doesn't matter. You need those people to say, no, you can do this. You can do this.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I like about our clinic environment too. So our clinic is sort of an open gym space. So it's if you're maybe imagining a physical therapy treatment, you might see sort of private cubicles or, you know, rooms with beds in them, but our space is very open. It looks a lot like a gym, and so the clients that are coming in, especially if they're coming regularly, they're seeing the same people day in and day out, and it's not planned, but we see a lot of interaction where, you know, people, our clients, see each other and they congratulate each other on, oh, I saw you last week, you're looking way better this week, or you really did well on that. It's great to see you kind of moving forward. And that's been really, really not planned, but really, really motivating for a lot of our clients.
There's that village again.
See each other.
Yeah, I was on the website, I was looking and I noticed it. I'm like, this looks very much like a gym. I mean, you are called NeuroGym, so it makes sense. But it did, and it did. And there's a few videos I saw of physical therapy with the therapists with their clients, but, you know, they're side by side. So I'm sure there's conversation and discussion. And again, developing that village of people that are going to be like, hey, you're doing awesome. Congratulations, you know, and who doesn't want to hear that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And have you thought about having like support group sort of situation there as well during the off hours?
Yeah, and I think that would be really neat. And one of the ideas, and we're probably going to go forward with it. I'm speaking, you know, a little bit early, but that our social worker had was creating a gardening group here in the clinic. With the idea that, you know, I don't want to explain it. Nursing a plant is sort of, you know, an achievement in itself. And a lot of people love to garden, and there's something to it, not only physically. So you can work on some physical goals by trying to handle a plant and sort of do the things you need to do with it. But it's also kind of a feeling of nurturing something along. And I think it'll be a fantastic program once we kind of get everything together, and it becomes almost like a little bit, it'll be a group program where people can kind of gather together, you know, and work a little bit on physical things, but really work more on moving something forward. And that has definitely parallels in someone's own journey, you know, coming back from an injury or dealing with a condition. So we're looking forward again to that program, but I think that'll be a nice addition and capture a lot of those things that we were just talking about.
Yeah. And then you guys are also working on a virtual rehab therapy, correct? So what is that?
Yeah, it's something we started actually during COVID. So when the clinic itself was closed, because having that nice open space meant, you know, people were in a space together. And when that wasn't possible, a lot of clients, especially some of our clients with progressive conditions, of our clients with MS, come regularly, and the sort of equipment and the gym style is very accessible for people with mobility challenges. So somebody who, you know, could go to a regular gym, but the exercises or the machines or the equipment wouldn't be quite suited to them because they've got a mobility challenge. Our gym is sort of designed to work well for that. So we've got kind of the equipment, we've got sort of the accessible things that are necessary to give someone regular exercise when they have a mobility challenge. And again, that's not always easy. Like, exercise is definitely beneficial for all kinds of conditions where people have a mobility challenge, but it's not always easy to access when you've got like a mobility challenge. So during COVID, when the gym was closed for the first few months, we noticed a number of our clients that come regularly with MS and had been coming for years. That was a difficult time for them because they lost access to exercise. And so, a number of people, their function took a hit because they didn't have access to physical activity. It would be like any of us, not working out for a while, we're going to feel it. But for somebody that's already got a mobility challenge, if you lose a little bit of strength, that can have a huge effect on your day-to-day. And so we definitely saw that. And so we, out of necessity, almost started doing virtual sessions. And it was a little bit limited in terms of what we can do. So without the equipment, working virtually with somebody, trying to figure out ways to approximate things in the home is not as effective, but it was definitely more effective than not doing anything at all. So that got us started with the virtual platform. And then it led us actually to going outside our geographic area. So we started working with clients kind of outside the Ottawa area because, we started to figure out, well, this does actually work. We can kind of coach people over video, especially if they've got equipment at home. We can kind of talk about the exercises and set up. And in some cases, we have a pool of equipment that we rent out. So some of our mobility training equipment, we can rent into a client's home. And then when they've got that piece there, the virtual training works really well because they can be on the equipment the same way they would be in the clinic. And we're just kind of taking them through the exercises as we go. So we actually branched out to working with clients in the Toronto area, in Alberta, and then kind of across the country. We've worked with people virtually, some that have equipment, others that don't. Some people have gotten equipment into their home specifically to do virtual sessions. So it did allow us to kind of branch out a little bit. And we've also worked our clinic, the tools that I talk a little bit about and that you'll see on our website are things that we've developed in our clinic over the years. With the approach that we take, the idea that I mentioned earlier of creating sort of the environment where somebody with a mobility challenge can kind of try and do the thing that they're not able to do and then have a little bit of success, is a pretty significant challenge. And it requires like a lot of creativity, on the part of the therapist or therapy team. And we've been doing this for quite a while. The NeuroGym itself started in the 90s and has been in Ottawa since 1997 or 1998. And over the years, what we've done is, where we have kind of challenges, we sort of pull together pieces of equipment to kind of create an environment where somebody who can't stand up under their own power can do that. And we built a machine, to make that work. The first one was built in someone's garage. Over the years, we got better at kind of creating equipment. And over time, we created our own line of tools. So we built about 6 or 7 sort of finished pieces of equipment. We got professional manufacturing. And for a number of years, we sold equipment as NeuroGym Technologies. And the equipment went into hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and long-term care facilities. So things that kind of grew out of our practice and were focused on that idea of, we set up the environment this way, and then the person can stand up under their own power. They can do lots of repetitions of it, and then they're going to get better at that. So we don't sell equipment anymore. A medical supply company bought the equipment line from us, but they continue to sell it under the NeuroGym name. And it's, I think it's probably tipped to the point where more long-term care facilities, let's say in Ontario, have it than don't have it. So it's becoming, now more normal, which was what we wanted. We wanted to kind of be able to change the field in that, going back to neuroplasticity, if we understand that the barrier for someone to get better at a skill is just having the opportunity to practice, it sort of changes a little bit how you look at someone with an injury or with a mobility challenge, where in an environment like a long-term care home, you may be inclined to think, well, there's not really much that someone can do to improve at that state. But what we're able to kind of demonstrate when we started putting equipment into facilities is that people can actually get a little bit better, or they can maintain their function. and it makes it a lot easier on them. It makes it easier on the people that have to care for them. So if somebody is a little bit stronger at standing up and they don't need as much help, that's much easier on a caregiver. You know, it's much easier on a facility, and it's more dignified and easier on the person. So that's where I think the uptake of our equipment in long-term care made a lot of sense. So facilities saw that and saw the opportunity. Like, well, yeah, if somebody can get even 10% stronger in their transfers, that's a huge benefit for everybody. And for a number of years with long-term care facilities, looking at the effects of kind of having that focus on improving mobility and then having access to that equipment, and what kind of changes that made on things like even their use of incontinence products. So somebody, you know, who doesn't stand up easily, maybe they're a 2-person transfer, whether they need it or not, generally they're in incontinence products because it's hard to get a second person to transfer them to the toilet. And then there's downsides, of course, to that, increased risk of pressure ulcers. It's just uncomfortable in general. And one of the, I think for me anyway, landmark kind of studies in the use of our equipment was where we looked at, so if we take a group of residents that are in that situation and then train them with our sit to stand trainer and, you know, make their legs a little bit stronger, make them a little bit more able to participate in transfers, is it possible to get them onto a toileting plan where then they're not using these products and they can go to the bathroom on a regular basis? And the outcomes, you know, were great in terms of they saw less pressure ulcers. People were much happier. Was easier on staff. And so those are the kinds of things that, we hope to sort of changes that we hope to make. But I think those are sort of the practical outcomes of this idea of plasticity, that there's really not a time where you can't learn to do something a little bit better. If you've got sort of the opportunity, but then also, I guess, the will to try and do it as well.
Yeah. Now, for neuroplasticity, are things like visualization a good way to start with people, so that if they can't actually do the physical, they're at least visualizing? I know there's been some studies on visualization and stuff for practice.
And I think there is evidence for that sort of rehearsal without physical activity can definitely be beneficial. The effects are a little bit less than actual practice, but it can definitely help. And it can, I believe, also be a good addition to physical practice. So one example might be like if somebody's able to come to clinic twice a week or 3 times a week, off days like visualization and mental rehearsal can help sharpen those movement patterns and create kind of a carry-on benefit as well. And certainly athletes use a similar process where, you know, they'll physically practice but also mentally rehearse, and all of that comes back to whether it's physical or mental effort, this connections between neurons in the brain. And the more we practice those patterns and the more, you know, we engage in that activity, the more those connections strengthen, and then the easier they are to access. So the more you sort of rehearse something, the easier it is to bring it back when you need it. Whereas early on, you might have to think through all the steps of how do I go about, taking a step, you know, shifting my weight, lifting the foot, bringing it through. But the more that's practiced, the more automatic it becomes. And then that's where that volume of practice, that number of repetitions starts to come in. And certainly like visualization can help that process along if it's sort of supplementing physical practice.
Yeah, would you say there's a benefit to mindfulness then in all of this as well?
I think so. I don't know if I'm maybe the best, to say. Our focus is definitely on the physical side of it. But certainly our psychotherapist, could give more background on that. But I think definitely there's a benefit to it in terms of being aware of and in tune and connected with your body. And mindfulness is certainly offers you a window into that, so it can, and I'm sure certainly help with that process.
I was reading that you developed something called, I'm going to read it, biofeedback trainer. and it was a video, and it had to do with a video game.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
what is that, and what is it for?
Sure. So biofeedback's something that's been around a long time, and it's essentially taking some kind of signal or information from the body and then displaying it for the person to see. One of the simplest ones is knowing your heart rate. So being able to look at a watch or a monitor and see what your heart rate is. And then people can use that information and can be part of like mindfulness exercise to change something about the body. If you can see what your heart rate is, and then you start doing a breathing technique and you see that number start to fall, it sort of helps you close the loop of, this is what I'm trying to do. I see some result coming back. And now when I make my next effort, I'm going to change it a little bit based on where I want to go with that measurement or that aspect, I guess, of the body. And that's, I guess, a primary process of how we learn. So this sort of closed loop feedback where I make an effort, so those neurons in my brains fire in a certain pattern, then I see what happens. So I either see my hand move toward a target or I see my foot lift off the ground. And depending on how that goes, so if I miss what I'm reaching for or I don't quite clear my foot off the floor, I use that information to change my next attempt in some way. And so that's that kind of feedback process that we normally engage in when we're learning. And that kind of is the core process, I guess, underlying learning. So biofeedback is taking information that might be otherwise hard to find or hard to recognize, and then displaying it for someone to help that process. And there's all kinds of things you can choose from. I mean, heart rate is one. So if you're trying to relax and you're not sure whether, that's having the effect that you want, you can display your heart rate, and then you get a little bit of feedback to say like, oh yeah, when I took a deep breath, I saw that number fall. So now I know what I'm doing. And it helps you learn. And eventually you might learn it well enough that you don't need the heart rate to be there, that you know kind of what you're doing. You've learned that process, and now you can just bring your heart rate down by doing breathing techniques. So that's sort of the underlying process. What we did in terms of biofeedback is it's come back to being aware of movement. So sometimes an injury that impairs somebody's motor function will also impair their sensory function as well. So after a brain injury or after a stroke, depending on the extent of damage and the area that's damaged, maybe I lose a little bit of the ability to move my hand, but I'm also having difficulty recognizing where my fingers are in space at the same time, and difficulty knowing, getting information about when I try to move. It's not as clear to me what happened as it would be if my sensory function was intact. So both of these things can be affected, and it creates, just going back to that closed loop process, it creates a lot of difficulty to learn if, not only is it difficult to make the outgoing command, but it's difficult to recognize what happened afterwards. So biofeedback is a way of sort of improving the information coming back to the person in order to help them figure out, so this is what happened when I tried to move. Now I've got information coming back that tells me what the result of that was, and now I can kind of continue in that process of changing my next attempt. So the biofeedback system that we created has multiple different sensors and different things that we can work on. But the first version of it, and the one that we use most often, is something called EMG. And it's kind of like measuring heart rate. Heart rate is an electrical measurement of when the heart muscle contracts. And EMG is sort of the same thing, but for any other muscle in the body. So when it contracts, you see like a little bit of a wave on the screen that represents the electrical activity in that muscle. And then you can see it on an oscilloscope, where it creates sort of a little bit of a line where it goes, up and down as the muscle fires and repolarizes. So EMG biofeedback, we can put a sensor on a muscle that controls the opening of the fingers. And let's say if the person is having difficulty not only activating that muscle, but also in knowing whether or not that muscle activated. They can then see it on the screen. And so when they activate that muscle, you see the wave change, and they're like, oh, okay, that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what, I was trying to figure out. So it's a way of sort of displaying for the person the result of what they tried to do. Sometimes after an injury, when muscles are impaired, it may be difficult to actually produce movement. So you may try to open the fingers, but nothing happens. And that can be really frustrating, and it can be a powerful demotivator, I guess, for trying to continue to use
it. For sure.
We learn alarmingly quickly. Like if we try and do something and it doesn't work, we learn not to do that again and look for other areas, that we may that may be more successful. So there's a really powerful kind of tendency, I guess, in the brain that when something doesn't work, to go elsewhere. And sometimes when we're trying to produce like plastic changes and produce changes in movement, we want to be able to work against that and come back to the injured limb, come back to the part that didn't work before, but we want to try and work it enough until it does respond. And so biofeedback gives us a way to sort of connect the result to what the person was attempting to do. So if I can't open my hand or no matter how much I try, it barely moves or it doesn't move at all, that can get really frustrating. But if I put a sensor on the muscle and then put it up on the screen, and when the person tries to move, they get, a rise out of that. They can say, okay, I know what I'm trying to do. And as they practice that more and more and get a little bit better at it, so it's just talking about biofeedback, the idea that if we can display for the person the activity from the muscle, they can make that connection between what they were trying to do and an actual result. And then with practice over time, that muscle gets a little bit stronger, the coordination of the firing gets a little bit better, and it can actually start to produce movement. And at that point, you can keep going with the biofeedback, or they can just work with the feedback now coming from the hand as they see it. And so we've certainly, coach people through that process where you start off seeing no movement, and then just by reinforcing the contraction of the muscle, it starts to produce movement, and then you can get something that can get quite strong, because once it starts to produce movement, you can resistance train and then, do more, and it becomes motivating in itself. So you can see the hand move, and then it becomes something, that the person is excited to do and motivated to do, and then that kind of takes over. But the real challenge is where that's not available at the beginning. You need something to sort of start that process off to make sense of what the person's trying to do. Because oftentimes, after a brain injury or after any kind of injury, you try and move, and the way that you used to do it doesn't work. You're trying to figure out a new way of doing it. And it can be kind of like flailing around in the dark, but biofeedback helps us focus on particular parts or particular muscles that we may want to try working. And it's a very powerful tool for us anyway, in terms of shaping movement and kind of moving in a particular way. You may have had similar examples from just regular physical therapy. Like it's really hard to teach somebody to contract their abs.
Yes.
So yeah, they're muscles that are on all the time, sort of automatically, and we don't really always do a lot of focused contraction of them. But biofeedback can be a great way to learn to use that. Or after, the common one in physical therapy is after shoulder injury, a lot of people start to shrug whenever they try to move their arm. And so one of the things that as the shoulder gets better, you want to teach someone is not to shrug anymore. And biofeedback can be a great way to learn to relax a muscle while you're trying to do something else. But the biofeedback system that we've created is something that was unique in terms of our clinic, in that we created sort of a multi-channel system where you can have several different inputs and sort of create complex movements using several different muscle inputs. So you can have a couple of muscles working, and then pressure sensor under someone's foot, and you can kind of create elaborate movement patterns to kind of teach someone basics of shifting weight to take a step, or to move a limb in a new way. So it's something that we've used again to create this sort of environment where someone can make an attempt at doing the thing that they're not able to do. and then start to get into and kind of get the end of the ladder or the end of the rope in terms of, okay, I have a rough idea now what I'm trying to do, and now I can practice that and get better at that skill as time goes on.
I think that's an amazing tool. I know, I honestly, with myself, if I don't see something as a result, like something, I'm going to get discouraged so quickly, like trying to lose weight or anything like that. You know, I didn't realize I was like that until I watched my daughter when she was younger. She wanted to read. When she was in kindergarten, she wanted to read. She was so mad because she wanted to read. I'm like, well, you're learning. You're working towards that. Like you were on number 1 level books and now you're on level 5. So that's good. You're learning. And, you know, and she wanted to learn how to do a cartwheel. And she couldn't do a cartwheel. And she was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm like, oh, wow, there's like a miniature version of me.
They often are.
Whoops. But it made me recognize that. And so for if I was in that position, having something like a biofeedback trainer would help me so much, so much, knowing the kind of person I am, to see that visual change. Because if you're looking at yourself going, I'm really trying to move my hand and I cannot move my hand, I'd be like, okay, I'm tapping out. Like this is ridiculous. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, and that whole process, actually going back to the book, The Brain That Changes Itself, is really well documented. Like it's something that for a long time researchers have understood about the brain, the sort of powerful aversion to things that don't work. And so we know pretty quickly this idea of learn non-use, how quickly that happens and how quickly.
Anything else you'd like to share about NeuroGym and brain injury rehab as a conclusion?
Right. I guess, overall the message and what I hope to kind of get across in the discussion is that, and I'm glad you asked the questions, is that the sort of potential for, change and recovery is definitely out there. And there's a lot of, I guess, hope to be found in terms of recovery from brain injury, whether, whatever the severity, whatever the degree, and whatever the sort of or physical or other outcome. There's always potential for change. Not necessarily, we don't know the degree of that, but there's always potential for change and potential for improvement. So I think that's the biggest message in terms of what NeuroGym, is designed to be able to offer. We have kind of set up our clinic, our approach, and almost everything we've done over the last 25 years to try and explore that potential for people to improve their function, improve their performance in daily activities. And it's still an exciting area because we still don't know, I don't think, everything that there is to know about how the brain changes after injury, and we still don't know what the far end of someone's potential for recovery is. We've worked with many clients that we've worked with for years. So people with progressive injuries, I think some of our longest have been coming for 20 years and, have stayed functional or even slightly improved function over time. So it's something that every day is kind of exciting, where we get to sort of push the boundaries and see, so how far can someone, go in terms of improving function after an injury? And it's always exciting, where that previously was not very, optimistic in terms of what you can do after a major injury. I think it's in general becoming more, we're becoming more aware that there is change, there's potential for change. And so it's more just kind of figuring out, so what are the rules and what are the ways that we can help that change along.
And it sounds like NeuroGym is very innovative and always willing to move forward and learn new things and apply that knowledge, which is really great to hear and see. I was watching some of the testimonials or the comments, the videos of people that have been with you guys and working through all these things. And it really is inspiring to see what, to quote unquote, put your mind to it, even though you're trying to repair things there, but how what you can do, and like the biofeedback helps to show you what you're doing, and all the virtual therapy programs that will allow you to do it even if you can't come in. I mean, you guys are being ridiculously innovative and being able to help people to improve or get back something that they've lost. So I think it's very inspiring. I think you guys are doing really great work.
I love the holistic approach that you're taking as well, by integrating so many professionals into the field. Into the whole thing.
And it's exciting for us as well. Like it gives us as therapists a chance to really exercise our creativity, and to have kind of not only a job that you enjoy doing, but to be able to really challenge yourself and think like, how am I going to approach this problem and help this person? Because no matter how much we see, someone always comes in with something that we've never seen before, or a particular way, that something we haven't seen it quite that way before. And every brain injury is different, and every nervous system injury is different. And as much as we sort of have developed a big store of knowledge in terms of, when we see this, this is usually what happens based on people we've trained. And we're able to share that with other clinicians, that have our line of equipment and that kind of are now working sort of along the lines that we are. But it's always exciting because we're always seeing new challenges. And that's kind of what makes it fun and makes it interesting for us as therapists at the same time. Where I think we're right there with the clients in terms of, in making that journey, we're kind of right there along with them, saying like, oh, that's exciting when that's something new happens for someone.
It's important to share their joys too, and their wins and their improvements, and, their motivation.
Celebrate the successes with them, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
No matter how small they are.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Eric. It's been an awesome conversation, and all of his info is below, guys. So
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's an honor. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Don't forget to come back next time, guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.